Poke the Bear is brought to you by PrizePicks.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 373, part of the CLNS Media Network. If you have time, please subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you have daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat with Evan Marinofski, Pucks with Haggs with Joe Haggerty. We have covered every step of the way this Bruins season, so follow along with us over at YouTube. And if you don't like YouTube, you can subscribe and follow along over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your hockey podcasts. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the best way to win cash this football season. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again, we are joined by the esteemed, the ever-knowledgeable Ty Anderson of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, how you doing?
What's going on today? Can you hear me? Everything good?
Yep, we can hear you. How are you doing?
I am wonderful. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Gonna go trick-or-treating very shortly. Not for myself. Not doing that.
I'm not believing that for a second, but that's okay.
Don't ignore the Boba Fett. You can't see the costume in the background, right? No, you can't see
anything? No, I
okay,
can't. No.
Okay, good. Yeah, so no, definitely I myself am not trick-or-treating, but I'll leave it at that. Ty, we have some hockey to talk about. The Bruins beat the juggernaut that is the Buffalo Sabres, yikes, on Thursday night, 4-3 in overtime. Noted top line assassin, overtime wizard, Marat Khusnutdinov scores the OT winner for the Bruins. Not the most encouraging game, I guess 2 points are 2 points, but for majority of that game, the Bruins were kind of getting their butt kicked. A win's a win, but still, I don't know if this is changing your overall opinion of this team and what they're building towards. It's good that Khusnutdinov got the goal, but other than that, you take the wins, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, you just want to get back to 500, right? And you're going to feel better about your team if you're over 500. You still don't feel great about the team overall in the sense that they have more games played than pretty much everybody in the Eastern Conference, and I think the NHL for that matter. So they're still working against it in terms of games played and the points that their peers can make up. But you can't lose to Buffalo, right? And if you feel good about Tuesday, which you should, you come back down from 2-0 down, you win that game. It erases kind of the bad feeling of Monday. At this point, you just don't really care as long as you're getting the wins, right? It all depends on your outlook too. Like, what's your outlook? Do you think they're a playoff team? Do you want them to tank? I think that they might have long-term ambitions of having a high draft pick, but you can't do that in October. I know that's like a really weird way of saying that because, sure, if you're going to lose and you're going to tank, lose games whenever, October, November, March, April, doesn't really matter. But to put your franchise through that for 82 games is a really tough ask. And I feel like the Bruins aren't there yet. Cam Neely does an interview with Nesson before the game last night, and he kind of talks about how they don't want to be just a playoff team. They want to be a Stanley Cup contender, and they realize that they may have to have some leaner years to do that. Understandably so. You don't want that in October, though, right? And that would fly in the face of everything they said from July 1 to the start of the season. Oh, we're going to be competitive. We're going to be a hard out. If you're not competitive, you lose games against Buffalo Sabres. If you're not competitive, you lie down and roll over when the Islanders put up 2 in the first 5 minutes of the game. They're not, right? And so they are competitive. So they're holding up their end of the bargain right now. So I think for where they are right now, winning games in October, you'll take it.
Yeah, it's almost like the way they played against Buffalo is not remotely a sustainable way of winning, right? And I think if you look under the hood at this team as a whole this season, at how much the disparity has been as far as high danger chances, how much you're generating compared to how many you're giving up. It paints a picture of a team that can't keep that up throughout the year, right? It's going to bite you in the ass eventually. I feel like that's the case every year where, there's teams that start off really hot in, October, November, and people do the deep dives on the teams that are either paper tigers or teams that are due for some aggression. And there's always those groups that either it's goaltending, it's unsustainable scoring that you're waiting for it to kind of regress back to the mean. I feel like the Bruins are kind of that team, but at least for now, to your point, they're staying in these games other than the game against Ottawa, which, my God, it was awful to watch. they're at least showing they're competitive. And I think if you're the Bruins, like you'll take that as you're trying just to build something up. Doesn't mean you're building a playoff team this year, but if you're having that standard that I think they're trying to set, I think you'll take that for right now. So again, I couldn't tell you where exactly this team's going to end up at the end of the season, but it is at least encouraging that whether it's, that bounce back game on Tuesday against the Islanders or a game like Thursday where wasn't pretty, but you kind of have a rope-a-dope approach of getting your ass kicked and then just landing a haymaker like when you have the chance. It's better than just seeing a continuation or snowballing of what you saw on Monday. Because if that was the case, I think we'd be talking about this podcast saying, all right, well, if Verhoff can play right away next year, you're looking at the positives, right? We're not having that conversation yet, and I don't want to be having those conversations. I think I said, after the Bruins went down 0-2 against the Islanders on Tuesday, I was like, I can't believe we're going to start talking about like a top 5 pick before Halloween. Like that ain't fun. We were having those conversations last year, but it wasn't until like February where it felt like the writing was on the wall. They're going to start selling off guys that it became a tangible possibility. And then it didn't actually become a legitimate topic until they really bottomed out. Like that's an appropriate time. And that still wasn't that fun. I can't do a whole fall/winter of that. So at least it's good that they bounce back and are getting points, even if under the hood, it's not ideal right now.
Yeah. And, I think you mentioned sustainability, right? Like another night where the high danger chances or the high danger shots are way too high. 14 high danger shots against Joonas Korpisalo. He stops 12 of them. He went 11 for 11 on stopping them on Tuesday against New York. So like that's not a long-term recipe for success. I mean, you're not going to have goaltenders, I don't think anyways, stopping 23 of 25 high danger looks over a 2-game sample. Like that's just crazy. Right. And so that's got to get sort of put in order here. And their goaltending in general has been excellent in their wins. In their wins, the goaltending of Jeremy Swayman and Joonas Korpisalo has combined for a .937 save percentage. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? Like how's that sustainable for a whole season, right? And then conversely, when they've lost, their goaltenders have posted an .835. So, if you can, you're either getting your face ripped off or you're clinging for dear life. And so it's a hard way to live, right? And you think that they're going to get it in order here a little bit. I will say that I did think that the shot total, for the most part, like I mentioned, like there's a lot of high danger looks, but towards the end, it was a lot from the outside, not a lot of stuff that was like super, damaging to you, I guess I should say. So like there's that part of it, right? But winning your games on the back of Morgan Geekie, David Pastrnak, and the goaltending, it's going to be hard for 82 games, right? Guys are going to have to drop off. Guys are going to get worn out. And so you really hope that some other guys can emerge here. And that's what you have to like about Thursday is that Khusnutdinov scores the game-winning goal in overtime. He got moved to center after they lost Lindholm. So like, if you can get something out of him, it's not going to revolutionize your franchise outlook, but it is going to give you another weapon to use in situations that you otherwise didn't have.
Yeah, without a doubt. And we'll talk a little bit more about Khusnutdinov and his upside and what's going to be a interesting test on Saturday against arguably one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference in the Carolina Hurricanes. But to what you said, some bad news for the Bruins as far as Elias Lindholm goes down in the second period. Collides with Jordan Greenway. Based on what Marco Sturm said on Friday, he's still getting an MRI, but at the very least, he's going to be out for a couple of weeks, I think, as we all expected. I know you noted after the game that not expected to be like a long-term, like season-ending thing, which anytime you see a guy who kind of clangs knees, you always kind of fear the worst there. So at least that is a sliver of good news, but still a tough loss for the Bruins and for Lindholm, who, even though I think a lot of his offense was kind of generated by the power play, was still scoring and was still like, I think looking more like, see a franchise 1 seat? No, but was looking like a legitimate top 6 center that was much stronger than what you saw last season. So it is a tough break, both him and the Bruins.
Yeah. Adding to what I reported last night, I can say that sources told me that it's going to be about, they hope 2 to 3 weeks, but it might be closer to 4 weeks. But again, not a season-ending kind of injury. They feel like it's a bullet dodged, and obviously there's going to be more testing as Sturm and the Bruins have said, but the initial outlook right now is, 2 to 3 weeks, probably more 3 to 4, and then they're going to go from there.
Yeah. So at least that is good news as far as not losing him for a long-term thing, because again, was helping your team, even if that top line wasn't really landing as many punches at 5-on-5 as you wanted them to be, but still your lineup's a lot better, especially this group, when you do have at least a stable center there in Lindholm. So ideally he gets back sooner rather than later. For now, yeah, it is going to be Marat Khusnutdinov on Saturday. I know people were wondering if they were calling up someone from Providence, but it does seem like Marco Sarman, even from our limited time with him, he does appreciate guys that, are either on the roster bubble or get scratched and they work their ass off on like their, during practices, do what they can to get back in the lineup and take advantage of opportunities. I feel like that's one of his favorite catchphrases, like opportunities and knowing when to be ready. And I think you see like Khusnutdinov, who starts the year on a fourth line role, gets bumped up on Tuesday's game to the top line after he switches spots with Geekie. Doesn't get an assist, but like with hounding pucks on that top line on Tuesday, brings the puck through the neutral zone that leads to Pasternak's 5-on-5 goal that was set up by Lindholm. So did a lot of the dirty work to help out that line. And then obviously gets the OT winner on Thursday. And he's a guy that, I'm not, I was joking, I think, after the game, like, just imagine if he's like the top line center, he just becomes like William Karlsson. That'd be great. I'm not really sure if that's going to be the case, but I do feel like he's a player that, whether it's, maybe not 1C, but he's a player whose skill set, even if he's not like a line driver, that I'd rather see him in like a top 6 spot as a like supporting ancillary type of player than a fourth line guy. I feel like his speed and his like puck skills, if he's put on a line with a lot of skill, can kind of help out that line as opposed to just like a straight line north-south kind of fourth line player. So he's intriguing in that regard, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is why you acquire a player like this, right? Like, this is why you get him instead of a second or a third round pick in exchange for Justin Brazeau. And, there's a feeling there of untapped potential. There's a feeling there of we can utilize him in more offensive minded kind of situations. I thought that's one thing they did well a year ago with him, was that they did put him, in much more advantageous situations to utilize his playmaking, utilize his puck vision, his ability to see the ice and to make subtle plays that can extend zone time or lead to a higher quality scoring chance. Like, you watch him in the offensive zone, and he does have a good head and shoulders in terms of where to send the puck, where to funnel play, and things of that nature. And he also draws penalties. He's pretty damn good at that too. And so this is a player that, if you want to, it's almost like, all right, you're either going to pump and dump him, or you're going to figure out, okay, he's our new Morgan Geekie. He's our new whatever. And we put him in a spot to put up, 35, 40 points. And now we're a better team because of it. I think that's where the Bruins are right now. And I think that a lot of people, including people in the organization, I feel like don't realize that at times, that like you are in the position now where you should be taking flyers on guys that are, high ceiling, but haven't produced so far. And you want to juice them up, right? Like, that's kind of what you want to do, I think, as a franchise. And, Morgan Geekie is a great example of that. You do that, and then you find out, okay, this guy's going to be part of our team now moving forward, and they have other options. They have other, guys that can have that opportunity and try to see if that can work for them. And so that's why, like, Khusnutdinov not playing in the top 9 is a waste of time. He should be playing in the top 9 somewhere. Right now it's top line, and that's awesome for him. If he can deliver and he can be an impactful player and he can move down to the second line perhaps and still be productive, like, that's even better. And so you're trying to flesh out your skeleton right now. If you're the Boston Bruins, like, that you have Pastrnak, you have Geekie, you feel pretty good about Zacha. You feel pretty good about Zadorov and Lindholm and McAvoy on the back end and the goaltending. And so it really is about, figuring out the rest of your body right now. And, okay, what's this guy? Can he be something for us? Do we have to parlay him? Like what's going to go on there? And so this is where guys like Khusnutdinov are valuable in that regard, because they're not finished products. You know this about them, but you don't know that about them. And that's part of the discovery mode the Bruins have to be in right now.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also good that he's in a top line spot for right now, just to see what you have in that player, reward him for that game on Thursday or for 2 really strong games, which is encouraging to see.
Mm-hmm.
It also allows you to, I think, keep that second line together for right now. The middle stat where you keep him on the wing, Zacha and Arvidsson, still not smitten with that line, but they are at least somewhat producing. I think they're outscoring opponents 6-3. I know it's like with limited minutes, but also to your point of like either found money or pumping and dumping players. Like I'd rather have those guys keep on cooking, right? And just kind of let them develop. If it leads to more points for Arvidsson or Middlestat or someone like that, and you're trying to raise their value, I'm all for that for right now. And even if, Khusnutdinov, I'm not expecting we're going to be talking in March. We're like, man, like Khusnutdinov's on a 50-point pace in the top line. Who could have seen this coming? I don't think there's that. But if he shows that skill set, and it means that once Lindholm gets back or Sturm figures things out and he's like your third line wing with like Minton and he's kind of just your guy that's hounding pucks and retrieving things and doing the dirty work, kind of what you saw on the top line, I think that's a positive too, because I do think Khusnutdinov's a guy that shouldn't really be a fourth line guy. And if it means that his ceiling is work, foot soldier on the third line and contributes to a winning line there, I think that's also a positive. So I think right now, even though it's maybe not the most sustainable method of putting him in the top line, curious to see just how he responds. And if he can show you something, that bodes well for, I think, the whole rest of the team. Because as you said, there's still a whole lot of work to be done as far as how Sturm has to build out this lineup, because it really doesn't feel like a finished product at all yet. And not a lot of guys, even the big guns, are necessarily clicked right now at 5-on-5 play.
No, exactly. And I mean, let's be honest here. Do we think that Casey Middlestat and Victor Arvidsson are finishing the year as Boston Bruins? Probably not. If the Bruins have their say, probably not. And so if you can have a guy who can play in that second line in Khusnutdinov, like you're totally okay with not overextending yourself to keep those players here, right? And that's sort of, I think, where they are right now. Like we kind of talked about, I think, a month or so ago, where I kind of said, like, to you, if they go through a whole season and Victor Arvidsson is still here after the deadline, something's gone wrong. Something's gone wrong in terms of like they either didn't get enough out of him to trade him, or he is so important to their operation that they have to keep him. And it's like, I don't know if I want that for them. And it's not a knock on Arvidsson. It's more of a commentary on where they are right now as a franchise. You don't acquire that guy and then decide, oh, we're going to keep this 32-year-old winger, in a contract year after we got him for a 5th-round pick. Like, no, like you want to trade that guy, right? But if you can't trade him, it's because no one has emerged as like a viable option to put in his spot on the roster. And so, that's where guys like Khusnutdinov and even Minton and I would go down in the minor league ranks too and bring up Poitras and Blumel and Lysell. Like some of these guys, they got to push these other guys out of their jobs and make the Bruins comfortable enough to move on from players that they clearly want to move on from this deadline.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more about potential trade candidates, including a guy that has drawn a lot of headlines this past week or 2 weeks in Pavel Zacha. Before we do that, though, let's take a quick break here from our good friends over at PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The hard-hitting football action is even better with PrizePicks. The weather might be changing, but the feeling of being right never gets old. So keep the season rolling on PrizePicks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. There's plenty of new faces in New England, but it looks like names like Milton Williams, Steph Diggs, and Drake May are heating up as we get into some colder weather. And if you want to make your pick on which players are about to go off on the gridiron, you got to go with PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. PrizePicks is the only app that offers stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. You want to pick more on Josh Allen's passing yards, rushing yards, and touchdowns? Now you can pick all 3 of them in the same lineup only on PrizePicks. You can also follow other PrizePicks players directly on the app and copy their lineups in just one click. Whether it's a friend, celebrity partner, or just someone whose picks you like, hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on PrizePicks. And it's not just football. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports, combine your favorite football players with players from basketball, hockey, esports, and much more. There's no shortage of ways to participate in PrizePicks. This week, I'm looking at the board. I'm going to cover all my bases. I've got Jaylen Brown for more than 4.5 3-pointers, and I'm all in on Drake May against Atlanta. I'm taking the QB for more than 3 touchdowns in Week 9 against the Falcons. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the PrizePicks app to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. All right, Ty, as far as the discourse over Pavel Zacha and his validity of being a trade chip, you've seen a lot of conflicting reports over the last couple of days. You had reports out of Vancouver that the Canucks really want that player, a guy who is a legitimate second-line center, a guy that can give you 50 to 60 points a year, good on faceoffs, can play on the wing, play on power play, play on the PK, also signed at a very affordable deal through next year as well. Should come as no surprise that is a guy that a lot of teams, especially contending teams, are coveting. So you get reports out of Vancouver. You get reports echoing that from Elliot Friedman. Then you have Pierre LeBrun mentioning on Tuesday that, the Bruins view him as a long-term asset, a guy they ideally want to keep. They think that he's kind of maybe in the same mold as someone like Morgan Geekie, where he can help you out now, but when you come out the other side of this rebuild, retool, whatever you call it, he can still help you out. Where do you kind of sit or where do you stand as far as what the Bruins should do with Zacha, especially if let's operate with the assumption that this is going to be a season where you're outside looking into the playoff picture?
Yeah. It's really hard to say, right? Because I do think there is something to be said for, striking while the iron's hot. It's a bad trade market. And if you can get a first round pick for Pavel Zacha, plus, right? Because who are the other centers on the market, right? It's going to be Nazem Kadri, Pavel Zacha, and who else? Like it right now, it's going to be a thin market. It looks like, and so if you can take advantage of that, it's really tempting and really hard not to, because you have to ask yourself, what's more valuable to the Bruins window? Is it the contract that Pavel Zacha will be on when he's 30 years old, when the Bruins are truly back to contending, or is it the return that trading him now would bring you? It's really hard to say it's not the first round pick. It just is. And so I think, especially from a team that's kind of like a fringe playoff team like Vancouver, where they're not.
I don't feel that good about that being oh, you're only going to get the 23rd overall pick. That team could easily just burn out, how banged up they are. That's all of a sudden the 14th pick or something like that.
Right, exactly. And so this is where the on-the-fly rebuild gets tricky for a team, right? And you have to give credit to Don Sweeney, because he did make these kind of moves a year ago, trading Brandon Carlo, who had term, trading Charlie Coyle, who had term, and basically saying these guys are not going to be where we need them to be when we're back to being a competitor, right? So he has done it before. It's just Zacha would be the best of those three players, in my opinion, in terms of trading. Carlo, Coyle, and Zacha, I think Zacha is probably the best of those three. And so that part makes it tricky, makes it challenging. But I do feel like that's something where the market might be too much of a perfect storm for you not to trade him. And that's how I feel. But the flip side, though, Connor, is they move on from DeBrusk, never replaced him. They moved on from Marchand, didn't replace him. Are you in a position to now move on from a third member of your top six and not have an in-house replacement lined up for him? That's the real question, I think.
Yeah, that's why it's so challenging, because I feel I lean with you that I don't even think it's going to be if you were to trade him the way the market is going right now, I don't think it's going to be just a first round pick. And that's why I'm I think you got to listen on whatever someone's going to offer you. If Brock Nelson, who was a 2C, who had 60 points last year,
mm-hmm.
if Colorado gave up their top prospect in Cal Ritchie, 2026 first round pick, and a 2027 fourth round pick, and Shillington, right? Didn't they give up a defenseman too? Which I know he's not really a guy that's moving the needle, but you get that, and you look at how much all the insiders, again, it's a lot of it's coming from agents, but talking about how friggin' crazy this center market is that all these teams are rabid over like the 2 or 3 centers out there. Like, if let's say it's just Vancouver, we've mentioned this before, but like, could you get a first and one of Willander, Coots, one of those guys? Like, which that almost could buoy, like, or balance out. Like, yeah, it would really suck if you lose a legitimate guy in Zacha, but you could get a legit prospect that could be in your lineup by next year. Like, Willander just made his debut. Coots is 18, but he like almost made the team out of camp. Right. So again, maybe this is just me over hyping what the return is, but I think that's where you have to really listen if you're the Bruins. If it's just a first, and again, like, you need as many first round picks as you can get. So I don't think you just dismiss that. You could say like, all right, we could use that, but man, next year when we at least have some more young guys on the team, right? Like we have Haggs, sure would probably help insulate a young guy that's gonna have a lot of pressure on him if we have like a stable guy like Zacha in the top 6 with him, right? Like, I could see like the value of keeping a guy like Zacha, and he's still going to be a good player as you kind of fill out your lineup. But if the return is going to be a first and a really good prospect to 2, that's where it does get tricky as far as like you could really accelerate your timeline of where you want your team to ideally be 2-3 years from now when Zacha would be 31, 32, but you've got a killer 21-year-old prospect and a kid that's looking good that you use that first round pick for. By moving on from Zacha. So it's not, I don't think, cut and dry. I think you can make really compelling arguments on both sides. But I do feel like when you get to whether it's now or especially at the trade deadline, when I think the value is only going to go up for a guy like Zacha, I feel like you're going to get some really, really good offers from a lot of teams out there. And it's going to be really tough for you to just be like, nah, we're sticking with this guy, even as good as he is.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem for the Bruins, right? Is that like, you have these high aspirations for getting talent X, Y, and Z, but they don't hit the market, right? And so what happens is like you almost have to overvalue your own talent that is not a knock on Zacha, but like a B-level talent, right? Like he's a guy that's going to put up between 50 and 60 points, maybe 65 in a really good season. You know, that's not going to elevate you over the Panthers in a 7-game series, but it helps you try to keep pace with them, right? And so this might be an example. This might be the true test, though, of like, do you overextend yourself for your talent because it's so hard to acquire external talent that you're kind of robbing your own future of getting perhaps, you know, your version of Seth Jarvis or your version of Marty Nečas, your version of, you know, name your player, Anton Lundell. Those middle of the first round, late first round kind of players that, you know, do become factors for a team, right? Like when they're a true contender, when they're a true winner. And so it's just such a hard conversation, I think. And the other part of it too is, you know, the more you rob from the present, the more risk you're running of guys like Pastrnak and McAvoy and Zadorov and Lindholm going, what are we doing here? Because like I'm this age bracket and all these guys are getting shipped out. So like, what's the vision long term here? I think that's something you got to be mindful of as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. So maybe also it changes based on where exactly the Bruins are. If they really do bottom out, then you're like, hey, we're open for business. But for right now, at least as you wait to see what exactly this team is, I feel like they're going to stay the course and just wait for that value to continue to tick up. Because I feel like value, unless Zacha gets hurt or his production flatlines, he's going to be getting a lot of attention as the year goes on. We're going to talk a little bit more about another name that is no longer a potential target for the Bruins this offseason, and Marty Nečas, unfortunately. But before we wrap things up, again, want to shout out the CLNS Media Network. If you have time, please subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where we pretty much have daily content between Poke the Bear, Pucks with Haggs, Bruins Beat with Evan Marinofski. We've covered every step of the way this Bruins season. So following along with us over at YouTube, we just hit 10,000 subscribers. Thank you all very much. And it's not just the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel. You can follow along with the Patriots Press Pass channel, Celtics All Access, the whole CLNS Media Network crew has you covered every step of the way for all your Boston sports out there. So please follow all the different channels as part of the CLNS Media Network. Ty, gotta say, my heart hurts a little bit. Marty Nečas, the one guy that I predicted in my my bold preseason predictions that now looks like dog shit already. Now it's further validated as being terrible that I said the Bruins are going to sign Marty Nečas. The dream is dead. The one guy I thought was actually going to hit the market is not. And a setback for the Bruins, and I think further validates kind of to what you said. If you keep on looking ahead to guys that are either going to hit free agency or what have you, it tends to be a fool's errand because usually it ends up being a B-level guy is your top addition, and it further validates why a team like the Bruins maybe has to put a premium on first-round picks, acquiring other teams' prospects, and replenishing the pipeline that way, as opposed to just trying to land the big fish when, especially with the cap jumping up, more and more players, I think, are more than happy to cash in with a contract that the team is more willing to hand them at this stage of the way the cap is working right now.
Yeah, I mean, we got to stop doing this, right? I mean, we've done this now for, I feel like 4 years now where.
But have you heard about Jason Robertson? They haven't signed him yet.
I mean, like we just keep going on and on with it. Like we were like, oh, Barkov might hit the market someday. Doesn't. Oh, well, there's Draisaitl. Doesn't. McDavid doesn't. Eichel doesn't. Kyle Connor even doesn't. I thought Kyle Connor would definitely leave Winnipeg. I mean, Jesus, it's Winnipeg. Doesn't do it. And now Marty Nečas stays in Colorado. And so now you're kind of looking at it like, all right, stop banking on this being what's going to save you in the future because it clearly won't, and I feel like this past year probably was a great example of it. You couldn't even get Brock Besser to hit the open market. He re-signs at 11:45 a.m. At that point, it's like, dude, you're already so close to seeing what else is out there. Why don't you just go do it? But he didn't. Excuse me. So a lot of these players now are staying where they are, right? And so I feel like you just can't bank on that anymore, right? And that's how you end up with end up in these crazy bidding wars for guys that you're not really in love with or guys that are not true A-level superstar talents. And so you got to avoid that because that gets you stuck in that middle ground where you're kind of bidding against yourselves in a lot of ways, or, you're bidding for a guy you're not actually in love with. Right. And so I think that this is why, like, I will say this though, I felt like out of all the guys that we've talked about that could hit the market and would hit the market, I thought Nečas was probably going to be the one. I really 100%. Did. I really felt that way. And I don't know why, but I just thought, oh no, he's not going to want to stay there. And sure enough, like he did, I didn't know if it was going to be, he couldn't stay there or like they couldn't afford him. That's like, it was like one of those two kind of feelings, but never all the same, like it surprised me that he's staying there. But then again, you see him and McKinnon. I wonder if his agent was like, this is a good spot for your career forever because this guy's unbelievable.
Yeah, he's going to yell at you the whole rest of the time, but you're still going to put up points. Still going to be in the mix every single year. But the dream is dead, Ty. It is frustrating. But again, further just validates that I think this team can't be looking at the white whale, the big fish out there, and expect that to be your savior.
Well, maybe you get Adrian Kempe now. Why not? And now we'll move on to the next one.
We're doing this all over again, aren't we? Yes, I'm sure we'll be talking more about that, or when Jason Robertson, when like negotiations hit a snag before he eventually signs an 8-year deal. We'll have these conversations all over again. So, Ty, before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the airwaves? All that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me at 985sportshub.com, as well as the Sports Hub hockey show every Saturday morning, 9 to 11 a.m. And you can find me on social media. Just type in my name, Ty Anderson, and I'll probably come up in some fashion. So that's where you can find me. How about yourself?
Yeah, you can read me over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. We have you covered every step of the way this Bruins season. So please subscribe over there on those two wonderful websites. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, you can at Conor Ryan _93. Ty, thank you again for talking hockey with us on this lovely Halloween. Again, for anyone who hasn't yet, please subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel. And also, this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the best way to win cash this football season. Just download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 on lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. This is episode 373 of Poke the Bear. You fans have a great rest of your week.